C'est l'opération Dragoon, ici, le 15 août 1944, on va dire, qui a achevé définitivement la résistance de l'armée allemande.
Cette armée qui débarque, c'est une armée qui rassemble des hommes et des femmes qui viennent de 5 continents. Parlons donc du débarquement de Provence, qui est un débarquement oublié, hélas.
Hello and thanks for joining us for this week's edition of France in Focus, coming to you from the southern port city of Toulon. Well, we've come here to remember the events of 75 years ago, the start of the Allied invasion of southern France, which began in mid-August 1944. Well, that massive operation was originally supposed to happen at the same time as the Normandy landings in June, but resources dictated that Operation Dragoon begin 2 months later. We're going to start by taking a closer look at just what happened here 3/4 of a century ago.
A force of 50,000 troops landed in Provence in southern France on the 15th of August 1944. Pierre Welch, a member of the African Commandos, was among them.
We were across the water over there, between the rocks and the islands when it started. It had to be around 1:30 in the morning. 20 landing vessels arrived on the beach where we're now. And when we set foot on the sand, we didn't even have wet feet. There were 600 men on this small beach, and we crossed the gardens to the main road.
The goal of Operation Dragoon, launched by the Americans, was to take control of the ports of Toulon and Marseille before joining Allied troops who had landed in Normandy. The landings here took place along around 100 kilometers of coast. Provence, with its deep water ports and rugged terrain, was a deliberate choice.
German defences were much more limited in the region. Most of their fortifications were on the English Channel, and most of the divisions based in the south went to fight in Normandy. That meant that there were almost no large numbers to deal with in a landing in the south.
Nearly 100,000 men landed and established solid positions in the first phase of the operation. 500 soldiers died in battle, far fewer than the 10,000 killed in Normandy on the 6th of June. The Germans were overwhelmed by the scale and speed of the attack.
We never thought it was going to be that simple. We were really expecting a response, but in the end, that didn't happen. Lucky for us.
It meant that the ports of Toulon and Marseille were freed by the 28th of August, earlier than expected. Success was possible thanks to the essential support of the French resistance.
The resistance played a role in helping air operations and preventing deployment of German reinforcements, of which there were not so many. Its most important role was in providing details on German fortifications and troop deployment.
In all, some 250,000 French and African soldiers, almost as many Americans, and some British and Canadian units took part in Operation Dragoon. They allowed France to sit at the victors' table in Berlin on the 8th of May, 1945.
We're at Montfaron, a mountain which overlooks Toulon, and here at its peak is a memorial dedicated to those 1944 Provence landings. Well, to find out more, I'm joined now by Florimond Calandini, the director of the Provence Landings Memorial. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. What do you think the Provence landings changed, therefore?
It changed
the outcome of World War II in Western Europe, because due to this, the Allies broke through a third point in the German defense. German defense was weak in the northwest, following on from Operation Overlords, and also in the east because of Operation Bagration. And it's the Operation Dragoon here on the 15th of August 1944 that finally finished off any German resistance.
The operation in Normandy and the operation in Provence, the two landings, were supposed to happen at the same time. In the end, they didn't happen at the same time. They were 2 months apart. Why was that?
Elles ont eu lieu à des moments différents, juste pour des
They took place at different times for logistical reasons. The Allies needed lots of boats and equipment in the northwest for Operation Overlords.
Dans le nord-ouest pour l'opération Overlord.
They couldn't fight on two fronts at the same time. So the Normandy landings took place on the 6th of June, and some of the vessels then came to the Mediterranean. Planes and part of the logistical support support also came to Provence, but leading 2 operations simultaneously on this scale, logistically, it was too difficult.
Thank you very much indeed. Florimond Calandini, the director of the Provence Landings Memorial. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We tend to hear more about the Normandy landings than we do about the Provence landings. We're going to take a closer look now at why that is and what's being done to keep their memory alive.
Looking at the rows of parasols and happy holidaymakers, it's hard to imagine that La Croix-Valmer's Pardigon Beach was once the site of a crucial military operation. Yet under the palm trees, this signpost acts as a discreet reminder.
I just noticed the sign, so I was reading it out to my daughter, so she knows what happened here.
Today, it's Jean-Pierre Large and Yves Boyer who are fighting to keep the memory alive. Former Army mechanic Large and history buff Boyer each head an organisation that works towards raising awareness about this page of local and national history, starting with school children.
We bring them here every year, usually in May as the school year ends. We come with remembrance groups, such as Le Souvenir Français, Provence 44. We work as a team. Our part is to explain the Provence landing, which is a forgotten D-Day, unfortunately.
So why has this D-Day fallen on the wayside of history? While Normandy's deadly landings have become part of the region's brand, the Mediterranean is all about seaside leisure.
Naturally here the sun is the main attraction. It takes precedence over the landings. But in Normandy, D-Day is a massive draw for visitors. So here, we don't need to attract tourists. So it's been forgotten.
And there's another aspect to this historical lapse. Dwarfed by the coast's tourist infrastructure, a little necropolis on the side of the road testifies to the diverse origins of the soldiers who took part in these landings. Many of them came from France's colonies.
Keep in mind that not long after the landings came a period of decolonization. So the territories that these troops came from suddenly became independent. And I think there was also a political will to erase that part of the equation.
A selective memory that France has yet to fully regain.
Well, we're now about 15 kilometers north of Toulon in the village of Sollièsville. And we're joined by Grégoire Georges Picot, who is a historian who's written about the Provence landings. Thank you so much for speaking to us. On this plaque behind us, we can see the names of some of the people who lost their lives as a result of the August 1944 landings. What do those names tell us about who actually was involved?
The army that landed was made up of men and women from 5 continents. Most were from France, so that's Europe, and then Africa and also Asia, the USA and Oceania. The memorial is astonishing in that it lists French soldiers, some born in North Africa. There's also a Corsican, an Italian, and lots of African soldiers. People from Senegal, Niger, Gabon, Burkina Faso. And what's surprising is that they were all in the same army unit, the 6th Senegalese Infantry Regiment, which suffered the worst losses in the Battle of Toulon.
Were they volunteers, or were they forced to come and fight here in France?
It's a curious mix of national conscription, meaning that if you're 18 or 19, you're called up by the military, no matter where you are in the colonies, anywhere in the colonial empire. So some were drafted. But alongside this system, people went to villages and recruited volunteers. In the case of the Provence landings, because volunteers had more military experience than conscripts, the majority of those landing were, in reality, volunteers.
And when the war ended, many of the people from the French colonies, they went back to their countries. They then went on to change the course of French colonial history, didn't they?
I think this is something that goes beyond any individual destiny. The army, generally speaking, sowed the seeds of nationalism. I have to explain that as it is paradoxical. Those under colonial rule experienced a sense of inferiority on a daily basis. It was imposed by French law. But by suddenly becoming a soldier in the French army, a door opened towards equality. When these soldiers returned home after liberating France and becoming saviors of the French nation, they were struck by the injustice at home, the inequality. And some would decide that it was not right. They would fight to obtain equality. And that took place in battles for independence. One symbolic example is Ahmed Ben Bella, a French army sergeant who was quite extraordinary. He was cited for bravery in battle twice and received the highest distinction a soldier can get. He became one of the founders of Algeria's National Liberation Front, and he was the first president of the Republic of Algeria. He was, incredibly, a model French soldier who went on to fight France in Algeria.
Okay, well, that's all we have time for. Historian and author Grégoire Georges Picot, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us.
It was a pleasure.
Well, that's all we have time for this week's edition of France in Focus. Thank you for watching. I'll see you again soon here on France 24.